Night had fallen hard over the city. One of those nights when even the streetlights seemed afraid to shine. A black car tore down the narrow alleyways, its tires shrieking against wet pavement. Inside, a man in a dark coat pressed one hand against his bleeding arm, while the other gripped the steering wheel with icy precision. Sheng Lai, the youngest and most feared CEO in the Eastern business empire, whispered about in every boardroom and back street bar, was running for his life. His rivals had finally drawn blood. The ambush had been clean, professional, and nearly perfect. But Sheng never gave up easily. He had leapt from his ruined car moments before it exploded, vanishing into the maze of city back streets like a wounded wolf. The echo of boots followed him. He could hear the shouts. He went that way. Don't let him get to the docks. And the harsh click of guns being readied. Rain began to fall, washing the blood from his hand and blurring the neon lights into streaks of red and blue. He reached a narrow lane behind a row of small cafes, his breath clouding in the cold. At the end of the lane stood a rusted fire escape. Sheng ripped off his coat, tossed it into a trash bin to throw off pursuit, and climbed silently upward until he crouched on the roof, panting. Below, the men stopped by the trash bin. The coat's here. He must be on the roof. One of them barked. Run him down, dead or alive. Sheng clenched his jaw. He was losing blood fast. He needed a place to disappear, just for a few minutes. The next building overhead windows lit with soft yellow light, and faintly, the sound of a piano drifted through the rain. He crossed the gap between buildings, landing hard on the other side, and peered through the window. Inside, a small group of girls stood around a grand piano. They looked barely out of college, bright-eyed, laughing, dressed in simple stage gowns. The one at the center caught his attention immediately. She was slender, her long hair tied back with a white ribbon, her face open and unguarded as she smiled at her friends. There was something impossibly gentle about her, like the sound of the notes she played. Qian Chen. He didn't know her name yet, but the sight of her held him still. Her friends were celebrating their first public performance. When her phone buzzed, she excused herself and stepped outside the rehearsal hall to take the call, walking down a dim corridor that opened onto the alley behind the building. The same alley where Sheng now crouched, waiting for the gang to pass. "Good night," she murmured into her phone, her voice soft and musical even in the dark. She slipped the phone into her purse and turned, startled. Sheng stood there, a shadow against the wall, his hand slick with blood. Before she could scream, he stepped forward, pressed her gently but firmly against the brick wall, and whispered in a rough, desperate voice, "Don't make a sound. Please." Her eyes widened. She could feel the tremor in his body, the heat of fear and pain radiating from him. For one terrifying heartbeat, the world narrowed to the space between them, the rain, the breath, the closeness. Outside, footsteps pounded closer. The pursuers had entered the alley. Thinking fast, Sheng did the first thing that came to mind. He tilted his head and kissed her. To anyone glancing down the narrow passage, it looked like nothing more than a couple stealing a private moment in the rain. The gunman slowed, muttered something obscene, and moved on. When they were gone, Qian pushed him away, her face burning. "Are you crazy?" she whispered fiercely. He staggered back, breathing hard. "I'm sorry. You saved my life." And then he was gone, melting into the shadows before she could ask his name. She stood there for a long moment, her heart pounding, unsure whether to scream, cry, or laugh. Her hand touched her lips as if to prove that the moment had been real. Then she turned and ran back toward the light, telling herself that whatever had just happened was none of her business. But fate had other plans. The next morning, the city woke beneath a pale gray sky. In the penthouse of Sheng Li's high-rise, the blinds were drawn tight, the room thick with the scent of whiskey and antiseptic. A doctor packed his medical kit in silence, knowing better than to speak unless spoken to. Sheng sat on the leather sofa, shirt unbuttoned, his arm newly bandaged. The painkillers had dulled the wound, but not the memory. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, The girl from the alley. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't run. Her eyes had trembled with fear, yes. But there had been something else too, a strange calm. A softness that didn't belong in his violent world. He poured another drink, watching the amber liquid swirl in the glass. What was her name? He wondered. Where had she come from? For a man like Sheng, finding anyone in the city was never difficult. By noon, his assistant, Mr. Han, placed a business card on the desk. She's a pianist, sir. Works at the city conservatory. Name's Qian Chen. Sheng's eyes flicked to the simple white card, tracing her name like it was a secret. Good, he said quietly. Get me everything. Where she lives, who she loves, what makes her smile. Meanwhile, Qian sat at her piano, the morning sunlight glinting off the keys. Her friends still teased her about the mystery man she had met the night before. Maybe he's your secret admirer. One of them giggled. Yeah, right, Qian said, forcing a laugh. Probably just a crazy person running from something. Still, when she touched her lips, she could feel the faint echo of that unexpected kiss. It shouldn't have meant anything, yet it haunted her. Like a note in a song she couldn't stop hearing. That evening, she was back at the concert hall, performing a gentle nocturne under the soft gold lights. The audience was filled with businessmen, patrons, and socialites, all dressed in shimmering black. Among them sat Sheng Li. No one recognized him at first. He wore a tailored black suit, his expression composed, his gaze fixed entirely on the stage. When she began to play, something shifted in the air. Every note she touched seemed to wash over him, unraveling the dark threads wound tight around his heart. The man beside him whispered, "She's talented, isn't she? Beautiful too. Maybe I should." Sheng caught the man's wrist before he could finish. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "She's not for you," he said. "She's mine." The man paled, stammered an apology, and turned away. After the performance, Qian stepped down from the stage, exhausted but glowing. The crowd's applause still rang in her ears when a familiar face appeared. Her boyfriend, Jilan Zhou. He smiled, draping his coat around her shoulders. "You were amazing," he said. "Don't catch a cold." Qian's heart softened. Jilan had been busy lately, working on a new project, barely sleeping, but he was still the man she believed in. Just then, a waiter appeared with a bouquet of red roses. "Miss Chen," the waiter said. "A gift, from a private sender." Qian accepted it, curious. Inside was a small note, written in elegant handwriting, for the girl who saved a life in the rain. SL, her smile faltered. Jilan asked. "Oh, just a fan, maybe. Nothing important." She folded the note quickly, hiding the tremor in her hands. That night, Sheng stood by the glass wall of his penthouse, looking down at the glittering city. He could almost see her apartment from here. Tiny, warm, filled with music. He had tried to tell himself it was only gratitude, a passing fascination. But the truth was simpler, and far more dangerous. He wanted her. Not as a possession, not even as redemption. He wanted her light to burn through the darkness he carried. "Mr. Han," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. Invite Miss Chen to the Sheng Group headquarters tomorrow. Tell her she's been chosen to tutor my younger brother in piano." Han hesitated. "Should I mention your name?" Sheng smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "No, let's keep it a surprise." The next afternoon, Qian arrived at the towering glass building, clutching the invitation card. She had never been inside such an intimidating place before. The walls gleamed. The air smelled of money and power. A butler led her into a spacious living room, where a small boy sat by a piano, his feet barely touching the pedals. He looked up at her shyly. "You must be my new teacher," he said. "That's right," she smiled. "And you must be a very talented student." For a while, the lesson went smoothly. Then the boy's dog bounded into the room, barking. Qian jumped back, startled. She almost tripped, until a pair of strong hands caught her from behind. The scent hit her first. Clean soap, faint whiskey, and something darkly familiar. She turned, and froze, It was him. Sheng looked down at her, the faintest hint of amusement curving his lips. Careful, he said softly. You're not supposed to fall unless someone's there to catch you. Kian's pulse raced. You're that man from the alley, he finished for her. Yes. She stepped back, flustered. I didn't know. Your employer. His smile deepened. Among other things. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Sheng said quietly. You play beautifully. I couldn't stay away. Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to thank him, to tell him to leave, to ask him why. But all she could manage was a nervous laugh. You really shouldn't say things like that, she said. I have a boyfriend. Does he love you? Sheng asked. Yes. He does. Then I suppose I'll have to convince you otherwise. He murmured, half to himself. Kian turned away, cheeks burning. Your brother's waiting for his lesson. Sheng watched her with something close to wonder. She had no idea how much danger her kindness had already invited. Outside, the clouds thickened over the city again, as though even the sky understood that what had begun with a kiss was about to change everything. Morning sunlight spilled through the wide glass windows of the Sheng Group tower, gilding every marble surface in a cold, flawless glow. Kian stood in the reception hall, her hands folded neatly around her music portfolio, trying not to stare at the enormous mural of the city that loomed above the elevators. It felt less like a workplace and more like the throne room of a king. The elevator chimed. Mr. Han, Sheng's quiet, impeccably dressed assistant, appeared. Miss Chen. The vice president will see you now. She followed him through silent corridors, where the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. At the end, a heavy door slid open. Inside, sunlight cut across polished floors and bookshelves filled with contracts instead of novels. Sheng was standing by the window, jacket off, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to his elbows. For an instant she almost didn't recognize him without the night and the rain. Good morning, Miss Chen. His voice was smooth, professional, almost too calm. Mr. Li. She managed, clutching the folder tighter. I wasn't told you were your employer. He smiled. That was intentional. He gestured toward a smaller room where his younger brother's piano waited. Please, continue the lessons. Pretend I'm not here. That was impossible. She could feel his gaze on her even when he wasn't looking. The boy played a hesitant scale, missed a note, and Kian leaned gently to correct his hand. Sheng's reflection in the glass shifted. Watching the way she bent, the kindness in her voice, the patience he'd never known growing up in a house built on power. When the lesson ended, the boy ran off to the garden. Sheng poured 2 cups of tea and offered one to her. You're nervous, he said. Only because you're watching me. He tilted his head. Then tell me to stop. She began, but the word dissolved when she met his eyes. Mr. Li, I appreciate the offer to teach your brother, but I prefer to keep things strictly professional. Of course, he said softly. Yet, here you are, still trembling. He wasn't mocking her. He sounded almost curious, as if her honesty fascinated him more than any symphony. That evening, Kian walked home through the crowded streets. Her phone buzzed. Jilan's name lit the screen. Hey, he said, voice heavy with exhaustion. I'm still at the office. Investors are giving me hell. Rain, check on dinner. Sure, she whispered. Don't work too late. As she hung up and stood there for a moment beneath a flickering streetlight, listening to the music of the city. She wanted to believe Jilan's promises, that once his project succeeded, life would slow down, that he would remember her birthdays, her songs, her laughter. But lately every promise sounded like an apology rehearsed too many times. And then, like a ghost of the night before, Sheng's words echoed in her head. Does he love you? The following week blurred into routine. Morning rehearsals, afternoon lessons, late night phone calls that always ended with, I'm sorry. I'm busy. Yet every time she entered the Sheng estate, something inside her shifted. It was dangerous. She knew that. But danger had a strange gravity. One afternoon the sky cracked open with thunder. The boys' lesson ended early, and the servants scurried to close the windows. Qian stepped onto the veranda to watch the storm roll in. Sheng joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine instead of tea. "I didn't think you drank during work," she said. "I don't," he replied. "But today isn't work. Today feels like memory." Lightning flashed across his face, carving it into light and shadow. "Do you remember that night?" he asked. "I've tried not to. I can't forget it." He set the glass down, stepped closer until the rain misted between them. "You saved my life, Qian. It was just coincidence. Nothing about you feels like coincidence." The words hung there, fragile and heavy all at once. She wanted to move, to say something sharp enough to cut the tension. But the truth was, she didn't want to. The rain began to fall harder, drumming on the roof. Sheng's hand brushed hers. A question rather than a command. She pulled back, trembling. "I have a boyfriend," she said again, though her voice no longer sounded certain. "I know," he murmured. "That's what makes this so unfair." Hours later, alone in her apartment, Qian tried to write music. Every melody curved toward the same rhythm. The thunder, the heartbeat, the silence after his words. She dropped her head onto the keys, the soft dissonance echoing through the room. Outside, a car idled in the rain. Sheng sat in the driver's seat, watching the light in her window flicker. He wasn't proud of the surveillance, but he couldn't stop. The more he knew about her world, the more he realized how little kindness existed in his own. He thought of his family dinners, filled with contracts and threats. His uncle's cruel laughter. The hollow victories that came with empire. And then he thought of her, standing barefoot at a piano, chasing beauty for its own sake. For a man who owned everything, he'd never wanted anything more. That night his phone buzzed. "Sir," Han said on the line. "Mr. Zhou's company applied again for Sheng Group investment." "Jilan Zhou." Sheng's tone sharpened. "Yes. He's Miss Chen's boyfriend, I believe." "Approve the meeting," Sheng said after a pause. "I'll handle it personally." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. Maybe fate had just handed him the chance to see what kind of man Qian trusted her heart to. The next morning opened crisp and silver, the kind of winter light that made every window look like glass ice. Sheng's office was already awake before the sun. Assistants hurried along the corridor carrying files, voices low, precise, and cautious. Behind the double doors, Sheng stood at his desk, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. The wound on his arm had nearly healed, but it still ached whenever he thought of her. A knock. "Come in," he said. Mr. Han entered, calm as always. "Zhou has arrived for the investment meeting." For a heartbeat Sheng said nothing. Then he nodded. "Send him in." The door opened again and Jilan Zhou stepped inside. Well-dressed. Polite, nervous in the way young dreamers always are when they face men who control their future. He bowed slightly. "Li, thank you for granting me another audience." Sheng lifted a hand. "Relax. Tell me about your project." While Jilan spoke, talking numbers, designs, ambitions, Sheng watched him with the stillness of a chess master. This was the man who held Qian's affection, the one she defended so fiercely. His voice was sincere, his ideas half-formed, his confidence brittle, and beneath all that earnestness, Sheng sensed a hunger, one he had seen too many times in men who wanted success more than truth. When the presentation ended, Sheng closed the folder. "It's an interesting proposal," he said, polite but distant. "But risky. I'll review it." "Thank you, sir. I'll prove I'm worth your trust." As Jilan left, Sheng's reflection in the glass shifted. A faint smile that never reached his eyes. So this is the man she loves. That evening, Qian arrived for another lesson. The house was quiet, except for the sound of rain against the windows. Sheng's younger brother was ill. The servants whispered that the master himself had insisted on no interruptions. When she entered the music room, Sheng was already there, standing by the piano with 2 cups of tea. "Your student's rusting," he said. "But it felt wrong to cancel your visit." I could come back tomorrow, she replied. You could, he said softly. But then I wouldn't see you tonight. She hesitated. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you'll believe them. She looked away. The rain painted trembling shadows on the marble floor. He moved closer. Slowly, until his presence filled the room. The scent of cedar, the faint warmth of his breath. You met my boyfriend, she said at last. Yes, he answered. His ambitious. You mean greedy. I mean, Sheng said carefully, that he might forget what's real if success ever knocks. Her gaze snapped up to his. You don't know him? No. Sheng admitted. But I know how men look when they're about to lose something precious. For a long moment neither spoke. The only sound was the rain. Then Qian took a step back. I came here to teach piano, not to listen to your judgments. Then play, he said quietly. Play something honest. She sat down, angry, and let her fingers fall on the keys. The melody began sharp, defensive, but soon softened into something sorrowful, tender. Like a confession spoken in a language older than words. When she finished, her hand stayed on the keys trembling. Shen was beside her now, his voice low. That's the truth I wanted to hear. She rose quickly. I should go. But as she reached for her bag, her fingers brushed the scar on his arm. Visible where his sleeve had slipped. The contact froze them both. You're hurt, she whispered. It doesn't look like nothing. He smiled faintly. You've already saved me once. Don't make a habit of it. Something in the way he said it, half jest, half plea, broke through her caution. She wanted to say his name. To ask why he lived like this, surrounded by silence and secrets. Instead she said softly, you should take better care of yourself. He looked at her. And for the first time there was no arrogance in his eyes, only fatigue and longing. When someone like me cares, he said. It's never safe for the person on the other side. She didn't understand what he meant, but the words stayed with her as she left. That night, Qian dreamed of thunder again. Of running through endless rain, of turning a corner and finding him waiting. In the dream he wasn't chasing her. He was protecting her from something she couldn't see. When she woke, the city was quiet, her phone cold in her hand, unread messages from Jillian blinking on the screen. Down in the street, a black car moved away from the curb. Sheng watched her window fade into the gray dawn. Knowing that distance was the only thing keeping her safe. And the one thing he could no longer bear. The rain that had haunted the city all week finally cleared, leaving the streets glazed with light. From the 32nd floor of the Sheng Group Tower, Qian could see the whole skyline shimmer like wet glass. She had arrived early, hoping to finish her lesson before dusk. Something in her chest told her this afternoon would not be ordinary. Sheng's assistant met her at the elevator. Lai asked that you wait in his office. He'll be a few minutes, Mr. Han said, then disappeared down the hall. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. Qian wandered toward the shelves. Between rows of financial binders sat an old violin case, polished but worn. She ran her fingers over the dustless wood. A memory flickered. Sheng, years younger. Perhaps once a musician before his life hardened into numbers and deals. The door opened. Curious, aren't you? Sheng's voice was lighter than usual, but his eyes carried the same unreadable depth. I didn't touch anything, she said quickly. I'd have let you. Not many people see that violin. You play? Not anymore. He crossed the room, stopping beside her. The business stole the silence I needed for music. Something in his tone made her heart tighten. She wanted to ask. He stayed in a world that seemed to wound him daily, but she only said, maybe one day you'll find that silence again. He smiled, faint and almost boyish. Maybe one day. They moved to the piano. The younger brother was still ill, so Qian began to play alone. The melody rolled through the office. Slow, thoughtful, full of unspoken things. Sheng leaned against the window, listening. The sun dipped behind the clouds, turning the room golden gray. You play as if the world could be forgiven, he said quietly. Music does that, she replied. For a few minutes, it makes everything right. And then life starts again. He turned toward her. I wish you didn't have to see my world at all. Qian looked up, puzzled. Your world. Sheng hesitated. The one beneath this office. The contracts, the enemies. The favors that cost too much. He exhaled slowly. If I could keep you away from it, I would. You don't need to protect me from stories, she said gently. Not stories, he corrected. People. There are men who'd hurt me through anyone I care about. The word care lingered between them. She closed the piano lid softly. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know you saved a stranger without asking his name, he said. I know you play the piano like it's the only honest language left. I know that when I look at you, I want to be the kind of man who deserves you. The confession hung in the air, simple, raw, frightening in its truth. Qian felt the room tilt. Part of her wanted to run, another part wanted to believe him. Sheng, she said, voice low, you can't say things like that. He interrupted softly. You don't owe me anything. I just needed you to know. For a long moment neither moved. The city hummed far below, lights blinking like lastless stars. At last she said, you should go back to your meetings. And I should go home. He nodded but didn't step aside. Will you be safe getting there? I'll take a taxi. Let my driver take you? He offered. It's late. When she refused. His mouth curved in that half smile that always disarmed her. Then at least promise you'll call when you arrive. She hesitated, then nodded. Right. A night fell early. Qian's taxi wound through the traffic, neon lights sliding across the glass. She tried to read the messages from Jilan on her phone. Apologies. Promises of a meeting tomorrow. But her mind was somewhere else, the violin. The sadness in Sheng's voice. The way his confession had sounded less like desire and more like a plea to be believed. When the cab turned onto her street, she noticed a black sedan parked under the trees. The same model she'd seen outside Sheng's office. She told herself it was coincidence, yet unease prickled at her spine. Inside her apartment she stood by the window, watching the car's silhouette fade into the dark. Then her phone buzzed. A simple text from an unknown number. Home safe. She didn't need to ask who it was. She typed back, less. A no reply came, but somehow the silence felt warmer than words. Across town, Sheng set the phone down beside his half-empty glass. The city stretched before him like a board of moving pieces. Alliances, debts, threats. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest flicker of fear, not for himself, but for someone whose world had no armor. He turned to Han. Double security around the Chen Conservatory. Quietly. Understood, sir. When the door closed, Sheng looked back at the window, where the reflection of the city glimmered like shattered music. You play as if the world could be forgiven, he remembered saying. Maybe it could be, if she kept playing. A week passed quietly, too quietly for Sheng Li's liking. On the surface, the days were ordinary board meetings, investor calls, polite lunches where everyone lied with a smile. But under the calm ran a current of unrest. His instincts told him someone had started watching the company, probing for weakness. He'd lived long enough in the gray space between business and power to know what that meant. An enemy was moving. And yet, every time his phone vibrated, his first thought was still of her. Qian's messages were short. Questions about lesson schedules, reminders about his brother's health, but even her most casual text carried warmth. She had become a fragile light threaded through his days, a reminder that somewhere beyond profit and control, the world still held gentleness. Qian, for her part, tried to treat her work as before. She taught her classes, visited her mother on weekends, answered Jilan's calls with practiced patience. But a small unease had taken root. Sometimes she caught sight of the same black sedan idling near the conservatory. Sometimes she felt eyes following her on the walk home. One evening, as she locked the music room, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, only to find Sheng himself standing there, coat damp from the rain. "You shouldn't walk alone this late," he said. "Were you following me?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Protecting, not following." Kian frowned. "You can't keep showing up like this. People will talk. I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she said quietly. "My life is small, Mr. Lai, yours isn't. When you step into it, you change everything." He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe everything needs to change. The words were too bold, too heavy with truth. She didn't answer. Instead, she started walking toward the gate. He followed at a respectful distance until she reached the streetlight. Then said softly, "Please, just text me when you get home. If anything ever feels wrong, call." She wanted to protest again, but his concern wasn't possessive. It was something closer to fear. So she nodded. "Good night. Good night, Kian." Across town, another meeting was happening in a smoky bar owned by Sheng's uncle. The old man's laughter was sharp, echoing off the glass. "You've gone soft," he told one of his lieutenants. "Our dear Sheng is too busy chasing musicians to notice half his partners are turning." "What should we do?" the man asked. "Remind him what loyalty costs," the uncle said. "If he wants to play family, we'll show him how blood is really used." He lifted his drink, the ice clinking like distant thunder. 2 nights later, Kian found a single white rose left on her apartment door. No card, no note. Just the flower, pure and unsettling. She hesitated before touching it. The petals were wet, as though from rain that hadn't fallen. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number, don't trust him." She froze. Another message followed. "He's dangerous. Ask him about the fire in District 9. Her hands shook. She wanted to delete it, to pretend it meant nothing. But part of her couldn't. The next morning she went to work early, trying to bury the thought under music. Yet every note she played sounded strange, fractured by doubt. When Sheng arrived later for a business visit, she barely looked at him. "You seem distracted," he said. "I'm fine." He studied her face. "Someone's frightened you." Kian hesitated. "Someone left me a message, about you." He stiffened. "What message?" "They said you were dangerous. That I should ask about some fire." For a heartbeat, the entire room felt colder. Then he sighed and leaned against the piano. "There was a fire," he said. 12 years ago. My parents died in it. My uncle inherited half the empire while I was still a student. I've been reclaiming it piece by piece ever since." Kian's voice softened. "And people got hurt along the way." "Yes." He met her eyes. But not by choice. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. She believed him. And that frightened her most of all. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered. "Then believe this," he said. "I would never let anyone harm you." He reached for her hand, hesitated, then stopped himself. "Not unless you asked me to leave." She looked down at the piano keys between them, their reflections breaking apart across the glossy surface. "I don't want you to leave," she said at last, almost too quietly to hear. That night, while she slept, another message arrived on her phone. A photo, grainy, distant, of her walking beside Sheng outside the conservatory. Below it, a line of text, "You've chosen the wrong side." Across the city, Sheng's security team intercepted a shipment at the docks. An ambush meant for him. It ended badly for the men who tried. When Han reported it, Sheng simply said, "Double protection on Miss Chen." He didn't sleep. He stood by the window until dawn, watching the first light break over the skyline. Somewhere out there, a girl was dreaming of music, unaware that she had already crossed a line no one could uncross. Morning light spilled across the piano in Kian's small apartment, scattering soft reflections over the framed photographs and music sheets. She had barely slept. The anonymous messages still sat on her phone screen. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the words again. "You've chosen the wrong side." By habit she opened the curtains and let the street drift in, vendors calling, traffic humming, the world pretending to be ordinary. She wanted to believe it was. She wanted to believe the fear in her chest was just imagination. Her phone rang. The display showed Sheng Li. "Good morning." His voice said, calm but strained. "Morning," she answered. "You didn't reply last night." "I fell asleep," she lied. He paused. "All right. Still, please be careful today." "My driver can." "I'll be fine, Mr. Lai." The formality in her tone silenced him for a second. "Kian, are you angry with me?" "I'm confused," she admitted. "Every time I start to trust you, something happens that reminds me how different our lives are." He sighed quietly. "You're right. They are different. But difference isn't the same as distance." She didn't answer. He ended the call with a soft, "Text me when you reach work." At the conservatory, the day unfolded like a rehearsal of tension. Students whispered about the expensive car that sometimes waited outside for her. A colleague joked that she must have found a secret admirer. The laughter made her cheeks burn. She kept her head down, fingers trembling on the keys. During her lunch break, she found a small envelope inside her bag. Plain white, no name. Inside lay a single photograph. Sheng leaving a building with two men in dark suits, their faces half hidden. On the back, written in hurried black ink, were the words, "Ask him how many lives his business costs." She sat very still. The cafeteria noise dimmed, until she could hear only the faint echo of her own heartbeat. Whoever was sending these messages knew her schedule, her friends, even which pocket she kept her keys in. Her first instinct was to call Sheng, but pride held her hand. If he was truly dangerous, warning him could make things worse. If he wasn't, she didn't want to sound paranoid. By late afternoon, she had made her decision. She went to his tower. The receptionist recognized her instantly and ushered her upstairs. Sheng was alone, standing before a wall of glass that framed the city like a living map. He turned when she entered, surprise flashing across his face. "Kian. What's wrong?" She placed the photograph on his desk. "This was in my bag." He studied it for a moment, then exhaled through his nose. "They're watching you now," he said quietly. "That means they've given up trying to get to me directly." "Who is they?" "My uncle's circle. Old partners. The kind of men who don't forgive success." Her stomach tightened. "You knew they might come after me." "I suspected," he admitted. "That's why I had guards near the conservatory." "I never asked for guards. And I never asked for you to risk your life for mine," he said sharply, then softened. "But here we are." For a long moment they stared at each other across the polished desk. Two people caught in a storm either had started. She sat down, exhausted. "What do they want?" "To break me," he said simply. "And to remind me that love is the easiest weakness to use. Love." The word slipped out before she could stop it. He looked at her then, really looked. And whatever he might have said was lost behind the silence that grew between them. Finally he said, "I'll move you somewhere safe for a few days. I'm not leaving my home." "Kian." "No, Sheng. If I run now, they win. I won't hide from shadows." He rubbed a hand over his jaw, frustration mixing with reluctant admiration. "You're braver than I deserve." That evening, as the city lights came on, Sheng gathered his inner circle in a private conference room. Mr. Han stood at his right. Across the table, two senior advisors waited. "The uncle's network is using surveillance teams," Han reported. "We caught one near the docks and another near the conservatory. They're not local. Probably hired men." "Handle it quietly," Sheng said. "No publicity. And make sure Miss Chen's name never appears in any report." After the meeting, Han lingered. "Sir, if I may speak freely, always, you're making decisions with your heart. That's new. And dangerous." Sheng's smile was tired. "Then let's hope my heart has better instincts than my enemies." 2 nights later, Kian left a late rehearsal and walked toward the street, where her bus stopped. The sidewalks were nearly empty, rain had returned, thin and silver. She noticed a car behind her move too slowly, matching her pace. Her pulse quickened. She stepped into the nearest convenience store and pretended to browse. The car idled outside, engine humming. The clerk glanced up. You okay? Miss. I think someone's following me. He peered out the window. The car rolled forward and turnishing into traffic. See. Gone, he said, trying to smile. But she still felt watched. When she finally reached home, there was a message waiting next time, don't run. Sheng arrived an hour later, unannounced. His expression was calm, but the edge beneath it could cut glass. Show me the message, he said. She did. He read it once, then deleted it from her phone. They're getting bolder, he muttered. You can't keep fixing everything by deleting it, she said quietly. I can stop them from touching you. By doing what, Sheng? Whatever it is you do when people cross you. He looked at her, the mask of composure slipping for the first time. I don't want you to see that side of me. Then help me understand it, she said. Because right now I'm standing between two strangers, the man who saved me and the man everyone warns me about. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Both of them are me. But only one of them cares whether you're safe. Her throat tightened. And what about Jilan? Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. He'll make his own choices. Before she could ask what he meant, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, the muscles in his jaw went rigid. What is it? She asked. Trouble at the docks, he said. Stay inside. Lock your doors. Then he was gone, the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. Hours later, the news broke. A fire had erupted in a shipping warehouse belonging to Sheng Group. No casualties, but the loss was heavy. Investigators suspected arson. Qian watched the footage on her television. The flames, the black smoke, and for the first time understood how wide his world really was. She texted him, "Are you safe?" A minute later came the reply, "Yes. Go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." She set the phone down but didn't sleep. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, mingling with the sound of rain. Somewhere in that chaos, two lives had become hopelessly tangled. One built on music, the other on fire. And neither could turn back now. The fire at the docks burned for 9 hours. By dawn, only smoke and the stink of diesel remained. Sheng Li stood among the twisted steel beams while firefighters moved like ghosts through the ash. The warehouse had stored sensitive shipment records and a month's worth of imported components. Everything wiped out. Mr. Han approached, suit on his collar. The police are calling it arson. They found accelerant near the north wall. Any sign of the crew? Before the first alarm. Professional work. Sheng's eyes narrowed. My uncle's signature. He looked east, where the gray horizon met the river. Get every name that touched this shipment. No outsiders leave the city until I say so. Yes. Sir. As Han left, a detective approached with a clipboard. Mr. Li, do you have enemies? Sheng almost smiled. In this business, everyone's an enemy. The question is which one lit the match. Back in her apartment, Qian watched the news replay. Flames reflecting off her coffee mug. Reporters shouting over sirens. She couldn't stop thinking of Sheng's text. Go to sleep. Sleep had been impossible. When the phone rang again, she answered before the first ring finished. You're safe? She asked. For now, he said. His voice sounded different, lower, clipped. They said it was deliberate, was, because of me. A pause. Then, no. Because of me. But they'll use you if they can. Her stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means I need you to leave the city for a few days. No. Qian. No. Shen. I won't keep running from ghosts. He didn't argue further. Only said, then keep your phone close. Don't trust strangers. And the line went dead. That night, rain began again, light but relentless. Qian sat at her piano, playing scales just to keep her hands from shaking. Outside, a car door slammed. She froze. Through the curtain she saw two men in dark coats, crossing the street toward her building. They didn't look like neighbors. Her phone buzzed. They're at your door. Stay quiet. Before she could think, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Another. She backed away from the hammering. The knocking stopped. A voice called, low but polite. Miss Chen. Building inspection. Every instinct screamed lie. Her phone buzzed again. Window. Back stairwell. She grabbed her coat, slipped out the rear window, and climbed down the metal fire escape. The cold rain stung her face. On the alley floor, headlights flashed once, signaling. Sheng's driver waved her toward a black car. Miss Chen. This way. She slid into the back seat, breathless. Sheng wasn't inside, but his voice came through the car's speaker system. Good. You listened. Who are they? Men who think hurting you will hurt me more. Where are you? On my way to end this. The line cut again. The driver merged into traffic, heading north. Meanwhile, Sheng's convoy sped along the river road. 3 cars black as ink. Han rode beside him, laptop open. They hit the warehouse to erase evidence. Han said. We traced payments to an offshore shell owned by your uncle's firm. Sheng's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He's moving faster than I thought. And Miss Chen? She's safe, for now. If anything happens to her, Han interrupted softly. You'll lose the calm that makes you dangerous. Sheng didn't deny it. They reached the abandoned factory district before midnight. Inside one of the empty structures, lights glowed. A trap, clearly, but one he intended to spring. Inside the building, his uncle waited with 2 guards, an easy arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. Nephew, the old man said. You've grown bold. I expected you to hide behind your lawyers. I came for peace, Sheng said evenly. And to remind you the next time your people approach an innocent woman, I won't stop at warehouses. The uncle laughed, the sound brittle. So the stories are true, you've fallen for a pianist. How sentimental. That's how men like you die, boy. Sheng stepped closer. Maybe. But first I'll make sure you regret lighting that fire. The guards moved, Sheng moved faster. The fight was short, brutal, efficient, years of controlled violence unleashed in seconds. When the smoke cleared, the uncle was on the floor, clutching a dislocated shoulder, eyes wide with disbelief. Sheng crouched beside him. Stay away from her. From my company. From everything that still carries my name. Then he walked out into the rain, leaving the old man's curses swallowed by thunder. Near dawn, Qian's car pulled into a quiet lakeside villa. The same retreat Sheng used when he needed distance from the city. The driver handed her a blanket. Mr. Li will contact you soon, he said. She nodded, too exhausted to ask questions. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and silence. On the piano in the corner lay a folded note in Sheng's handwriting, safe for now. Trust no one but Han. She sat at the keys, touched a single note, and let the sound fill the empty rooms. Somewhere beyond the lake, sirens echoed again. The city was burning in its own way, and the man who had built its tallest towers was finally at war with himself. Dawn came gray and brittle. News helicopters hovered above the river, their cameras sweeping over the scorched ruins of the warehouse. Every channel carried the same headline: Arsom. Dookes. See Onand. Sheng Li watched the broadcast in silence from a private conference room. The fire had been contained, but the damage was spreading in other ways. Through rumor, through politics, through fear. He had spent the night cleaning blood from his cuffs, not his conscience. Mr. Han stood beside him, phone pressed to his ear. 3 reporters at the gate. 2 investigators in the lobby. He murmured. They have warrants for the shipping logs. Let them in, Sheng said. We have nothing to hide. The Han lowered the phone. We have everything to hide. Sheng's eyes flicked toward him. Then hide it well. By noon, detectives filled the top floor. Their questions came polite, practiced, and razor sharp. Mr. Li, several witnesses say they saw your car near the docks before the fire. I have many cars, Sheng replied. Most are faster than your witnesses. Your uncle's company claims you've been involved in illegal shipments. Sheng smiled without humor. My uncle has claimed worse. They left frustrated, carrying more suspicion than proof. Outside the glass walls, reporters shouted his name until the security gates swallowed their voices. At the lakeside villa, Kian woke to the sound of rain against the windows. A tray of breakfast waited untouched. Her phone showed no new messages from Sheng. Only a news alert: police questioned billionaire CEO in connection with arson probe. She turned off the television after the third replay of his photograph. He looked composed, but she recognized the fatigue behind his eyes. Her pulse quickened when footsteps sounded outside. A soft knock. Miss Chen. It's Han Dai. He stepped inside, still in his dark suit, his expression unreadable. Mr. Lei asked me to stay with you until this settles. What's happening out there? Everything, he said simply. Police, shareholders. Some want him arrested. Others want him erased. Kian swallowed hard. And the men who came for me. They haven't been found. The quiet between them thickened. Why is he still fighting? She asked finally. Because the moment he stops, Han said, they'll come for you again. By evening. The company's stock had dropped 8%. Journalists dug up every rumor. The fire 12 years ago. The uncle's lawsuits, whispers of a secret heir. Cameras waited outside every property Sheng owned. The world had decided its villain before the trial began. In a rented office downtown, the uncle's lawyers prepared statements accusing Sheng of fraud, bribery, and worse. Each accusation was a bullet aimed not at his empire, but at his credibility. After 2 days of isolation, Kian couldn't bear the waiting. She called his private number. No answer. She tried again. At last, his voice came. Hoarse, low. Kian. Where are you? Moving. The police want a statement. The press want blood. I can't give either. I'm not running. I'm regrouping. She hesitated. I saw the news. They're saying terrible things. They always do. Truth doesn't sell. Then tell me the truth. A pause. If I do, you'll wish I hadn't. Static filled the line. Then he said, pack a bag. Han will bring you to me tonight. Please. Kian. No questions? The call ended. Night fell early, wind snapping branches along the lake. Han drove fast, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Where are we going? She asked. To a place even the police don't know, he said. A holding site for company archives. He wants to show you something. Halfway down the highway, a black SUV appeared in the rearview mirror. Too close, too steady. Han's jaw tightened. Hold on. The car veered onto a side road, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The SUV followed. Headlights flared. A sudden impact jolted them sideways, glass shattered across Kian's lap. Han fought the wheel, swerved again, and the sedan shot down a narrow service lane toward the docks. Who are they? She shouted. Not police, Han gritted. Policemen. Another impact. The engine screamed. Then, through the storm, a second set of lights appeared ahead. Sheng's car. He swung across the road, blocking the attacker's path. The SUV skidded, lost traction, and slammed into a guardrail. Han braked hard. Steam hissed from under the hood. Kian's door opened. Sheng was there, pulling her out, voice rough but steady. You all right? She nodded, trembling. What is happening? Proof, he said. Proof that will end this. They reached an abandoned warehouse on the river. One that hadn't burned. Inside, on hadn't tarps and dust, sat rows of servers and ledgers. Sheng tapped a code into a terminal. The screen flickered to life, showing transaction records tied to his uncle's company. This is what they tried to destroy, he said. Accounts, payoffs, routes. Everything that connects him to the fires, the killings, the deals. Kian stared at the screen. Why tell me? Because if something happens to me, someone has to tell the world the truth. She shook her head. You can't ask me to carry that. I already did when I let you save me that night. Outside, sirens wailed again. Closer this time. Han looked up. They found us. Sheng turned to Kian. There's a tunnel under the back wall. Take it. Han knows the route. What about you? I'll keep them busy. No, she said, voice shaking. Not again. You can't keep standing in the fire. He smiled faintly. I was born in it. He pressed a flash drive into her hand. Run. Into the night, she hesitated only once, looking back as the first floodlights swept the yard. Sheng's figure stood framed in the doorway, rain turning to steam around him. Then Han pulled her toward the tunnel. Behind them, shouts rose. Orders, engines, the thud of boots. Qian clutched the flash drive, her breath echoing in the narrow passage. The world above had become a storm of sirens and smoke. When they emerged on the far side of the embankment, Han radioed once, then smashed the device. "Where do we go?" she asked. "Somewhere they don't read the headlines," he said. "And we wait." She looked back toward the burning skyline. For the first time, she wasn't sure if Sheng Li would make it out alive, or if the truth he carried could ever be enough to save either of them. The tunnel opened onto the riverbank north of the city. Cold air rushed in, smelling of metal and rain. Qian climbed out first, clutching the flash drive that seemed to burn against her palm. Behind her, Han sealed the hatch with a metal lever, then scanned the dark shoreline. "Move," he said. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they sweep this sector." They followed the river east, boots sinking into wet sand. The storm had thinned into mist, but every sound felt amplified. The slap of water, the whine of distant sirens, the throb of helicopter blades somewhere overhead. When a spotlight flicked across the clouds, Han shoved her behind a collapsed pier. "Stay down." She crouched, heartbeat drumming in her ears. The beam passed, sweeping the surface like a restless eye. Only when it faded did Han speak again. "There's a service tunnel under the highway ahead. It'll take us to the freight yard. From there, I can get us out." "Out to where?" "Anywhere that isn't burning." They ran. The freight yard, rows of rusted containers loomed like sleeping giants. Han led her between them, counting under his breath, until they reached a green cargo car marked with an old Sheng Group logo. He pried the door open. Inside, Qian hesitated. "What about Sheng?" "He'll find us," Han said. "He always does." She climbed in. The air smelled of oil and dust. Han pulled the door shut, darkness swallowed them. Outside, the wind howled between the rails. A few minutes later, the train lurched forward, slow at first, then faster, wheels hammering like a heartbeat. Qian sat on the metal floor, knees drawn up, trying to make sense of everything. The messages, the chase, the fire. Across from her, Han checked a small tablet that glowed dim blue. "They're tracking every known route out of the city," he murmured. "If this works, we'll be ghosts by sunrise. And if it doesn't, then we improvise." The intercept, they made it 40 miles before the signal light ahead turned red. The train slowed. Han peered through a crack in the door. "Roadblock," he whispered. Too soon. Headlights flared outside, bouncing off rain-slick metal. Men with flashlights moved along the cars, shouting to each other. Han drew a small radio. Lay. Static. Then Sheng's voice, faint but steady. "I'm close. Keep her hidden. Not much time. Then make it." Lahan switched off the radio and turned to Qian. "When I say run, you run. Don't stop for anything." Before she could answer, the door rattled. A flashlight beam cut through the gap. Han slammed his shoulder into the opposite wall, sending the door skidding shut again. "Go." They sprinted through the rear hatch, dropping into a tangle of weeds beside the tracks. Shouts followed, boots clanging on steel. Han pulled her toward a drainage culvert barely wide enough for one person. "In here." The tunnel smelled of rust and river water. They crawled until light reappeared ahead, gray dawn seeping through a grate. Han forced it open. They emerged behind a row of shuttered warehouses on the outskirts of the industrial district. A black car waited by the curb. Sheng stood beside it, coat soaked, jaw set. "Get in." The escape route. The car tore through empty back roads, speedometer climbing. No one spoke. The highway signs blurred past Airport 15 Mai, harbor exit closed. Finally Qian found her voice. "Where are we going?" "Out of jurisdiction," Sheng said. "There's a small airfield beyond the ridge. We'll disappear there." "You mean hide?" "For now, yes." She stared at him. He looked older than she remembered. Tired, unshaven, eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. but his hands on the wheel were steady, confident, unbreakable. Behind them, distant sirens rose again. Sheng accelerated. They won't stop until they have that drive, he said. It's the proof that can bury them. Or me. Kian gripped the flash drive tighter. Then we can't lose it. The airfield dawn broke. Just as they reached the old airstrip. A strip of cracked asphalt beside a cluster of hangars long abandoned by commercial pilots. A small twin-engine plane waited, propellers spinning lazily. A mechanic waved once and disappeared into the mist. Han loaded a crate into the cargo hold. Sheng turned to Qian. You've never flown, have you? Only as a passenger. Good. Today you still are. She hesitated at the steps. What happens when we leave, when buy time? He said. And in that time, we decide what the truth is worth. She wanted to argue, to demand that he surrender, to insist that justice could still work, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't defiance, it was survival. The engines roared to life. The plane rolled down the cracked runway, lifted through the fog, and the ground fell away. The city below looked small, its towers swallowed by smoke. For a brief moment, Qian felt weightless. Then the reality returned: exile, not freedom. In the skies at cruising height, Sheng finally spoke. There's a man I trust in Singapore. He can decrypt the records on that drive. Once it's public, my uncle loses everything. And you? He smiled faintly. I lose anonymity. Maybe more. But at least the game ends. Han, seated ahead, glanced back. Feels low. We'll need to land in an hour. Border patrol. Quiet tonight. But nothing's guaranteed. The radio crackled. Unfamiliar voices, clipped and official unidentified aircraft. Respond immediately. Sheng cursed under his breath. They've locked radar. Can you outrun them? Qian asked. In a plane this old. Only if the clouds are kind. He banked hard into a wall of mist. The world outside vanished. White, endless, silent except for the engines. Qian grabbed the seat in front of her, knuckles white. The instruments flickered, static filled the radio. Then, suddenly, clear air. Mountains below, no pursuit. Sheng exhaled. They lost us. Han checked his map. Nearest safe strips across the border. 40 miles. Do it, Sheng said. Touchdown. The plane landed rough but steady on a deserted farm road. They taxied behind an abandoned barn and cut the engines. For the first time in hours, silence felt solid. No sirens, no helicopters, only wind. Qian stepped down onto the dirt. The air smelled of pine. Where are we? Nowhere, Sheng said. That's the point. Han was already on the phone, speaking in low tones. Sheng watched the horizon, hand resting on the carbine he kept in the flight bag. Not a threat, just insurance. Qian walked up beside him. You can breathe now, she said softly. Not yet. Exile isn't freedom. It's a pause. She studied him for a moment, then said, You're still the man I met that night in the rain. He looked at her. And you're still the only reason I survived it. They stood there until the sun broke through the clouds, painting the mountains in gold. Somewhere behind them, the city kept burning. Ahead, the road twisted into the unknown. For now, they had distance. They had proof. And they had time. Just enough to plan the next move in a war neither of them had asked to fight. The mountain air was thinner. Sharper. As if it had been scraped clean of mercy. The farmhouse where they hid stood at the end of a gravel road. One cracked windmill turning in the wind. It looked deserted. And that was exactly why Sheng Li had chosen it. For 3 days they lived by silence. And monitored encrypted channels through a battered laptop, powered by a generator. Qian cooked what little they had, and tried not to think about the city left behind. Sheng hardly slept. Each dawn he checked the ridge line through binoculars, looking for movement that never came. On the 4th morning, a transmission crackled through Han's headset. Intercepted chatter, he said. Border security found a body at the airfield. One of the uncle's men. They think you're dead. Sheng allowed himself a single breath. Good. Let them think so. He turned to Qian. From now on, new names. You're Lin Kai. I'm Mr. Shen. If anyone asks, you're my sister. How she frowned. I'll never remember that. You'll have to, he said quietly. Exile only works if we disappear completely. They fell into uneasy rhythm. At dusk, Sheng taught her how to read a map without a GPS. At dawn, she brewed tea on a single burner. Sometimes, when he wasn't looking, she saw the bandage at his shoulder darken and knew the wound from the fire hadn't fully healed. Why won't you let Hen drive you to a doctor? She asked. Because doctors talk, he replied. So do pianos, she muttered. That drew the faintest smile. Then keep playing. It reminds me there's still music in this world. But the quiet couldn't last. On the 5th night, Hun picked up an encrypted beacon pulsing every 30 seconds. Coordinates pinging from a satellite that shouldn't exist anymore. It's coming from the capital, he said. Someone's broadcasting Sheng Group's internal frequency. Qian leaned over his shoulder, meaning, someone inside is alive and trying to reach him. Sheng's eyes narrowed. It's bait. My uncle's people want me to surface. Or it's proof the data is spreading. Hen countered. Sheng looked ignore it. If that drive gets traced, they'll know you're with me. Then we stop them, she said before fear could catch up to her words. By midnight they were on the road again. No lights, no papers. 3 sets of false IDs. The car hummed along narrow passes carved into the mountainside. Below, valleys glimmered with scattered towns. Above, stars wheeled cold and indifferent. At a checkpoint outside a tunnel, a guard waved them down. Sheng lowered the window, handed over the documents. Evening, he said, voice casual. The guard's flashlight swept across their faces. Qian kept her eyes down. Another guard appeared behind him, speaking into a radio. Han's fingers tightened on the wheel. Problem? Sheng asked lightly. Routine check, the guard said, but his tone carried weight. Then, from somewhere deeper in the tunnel, a siren wailed. The first guard turned his head. Proceed. Quickly. Han didn't wait for a second invitation. The car shot forward into darkness. They crossed the border by dawn. In the next city, a sprawl of neon and humidity. Fake identities came alive, hotel bookings under the names Shenju and Lin Kai. Passports stamped weeks ago through a system Sheng's contacts still controlled. For the first time in days, they had walls, electricity, anonymity. While Qian slept, Sheng slipped into the lobby to use a public terminal. He logged into a hidden server and uploaded the flash drive contents to an encrypted cloud. Halfway through the transfer, a window blinked open. USER UNK Duin, a CCSS granted a message appeared. You should have stayed dead. The cursor blinked once. Then another line appeared. We're coming for your ghost. Sheng shut the terminal, heart pounding. When he turned, Han was standing by the elevator, eyes scanning the lobby. We need to move again. Already? They traced the IP faster than expected. By afternoon, unmarked sedans prowled the streets near the hotel. Cameras clicked. A drone buzzed somewhere overhead. Sheng led them through the market crowds, down alleys smelling of spice and diesel. Han kept watch behind, Han never far from his coat pocket. At a bridge over the river, Sheng grabbed Qian's hand. Jump. What? Trust me. They vaulted the railing into a service barge below. Water sprayed their faces. The barge shuddered but kept moving with the current. Above, the sedans screeched to a halt, searchlights flashing across the water. But the river swallowed them whole. They rode in silence until the city lights thinned and jungle replaced concrete. Only then did Sheng speak. You still have the drive. Qian nodded. Good. That's the only reason we're still alive. 2 days later, they reached the coast. An old fishing village where the ocean met mangrove. Han arranged a shack through a friend who didn't ask questions. The walls were thin, the roof leaked, but it was sanctuary of a kind. At night the sea breathed in and out, steady as sleep. Sheng sat by the doorway, watching phosphorescent waves, while Qian mended a torn map with tape. How long can we keep running? She asked. Until the truth is louder than the lies. And if it never is, then we become ghosts for good. She looked at him in the half-light. You don't scare easily, do you? I'm terrified, he said. But fear keeps me awake. The whisper from nowhere near midnight, the radio on Han's desk crackled to life again, faint at first. Then clearer, a woman's voice, filtered through static. Sheng Li, your uncle's been arrested. They froze. Han said into the mic. The data leaked online. Authorities moved in. But someone inside your board sold your name with it. You're wanted under new charges, treason and fraud. They've erased your identity. The line went dead. For a long moment only the surf answered. Then Sheng said quietly, so that's how ghosts are born. He walked outside, barefoot on the wet sand. The horizon a thin silver line. Qian followed, wrapping his coat around him. What happens now? She asked. We start over, he said. Different names. She took his hand. Then, let's not waste the lives we've already lost. The tide rose around their feet, washing away every footprint behind them. The tide turned crimson with dawn. From the small house by the mangroves, Sheng Li watched the light creep across the water, turning fishing boats into silhouettes. Somewhere behind that horizon, his name had become a headline again. This time branded fugitive. Han set down a portable radio on the table. Every major network's running it, he said. Interpol, the Financial Commission, even the Maritime Police. You're listed as armed and missing. Which means they're afraid. Sheng replied. They only shout that loud when the truth's close. Qian stirred beside the window, still wrapped in a blanket. How can you sound calm when your own country wants you gone? He smiled faintly. I've been gone a long time. A new identity by afternoon. The three of them moved again, further down the coast to a seaport that traded more in secrets than cargo. Han bought fake manifests and a set of work papers from a captain who didn't ask names. Sheng shaved, cut his hair, and switched to plain clothes. The mirror threw back an image that barely looked human. Just another drifter in the tropics. Qian watched silently. You're erasing yourself, she said. It's the only way to survive. And afterward, when the time's right, we make noise again. He slid a slip of paper toward her. Memorize this number, if we get separated. Call it from any public line and ask for Lark. Who's Lark? An old journalist who owes me a favor and doesn't scare easily. Signals for the next week they lived among fishermen. Sheng helped repair nets. Han listened to foreign broadcasts at night, and Qian played an old piano in a cafe by the docks to earn cash. Locals came to hear the quiet girl with the storm in her fingers. Each note became a message Sheng couldn't say aloud. We're still here. One evening, Han burst into the cafe holding a folded newspaper. It's spreading, he said, breathless. The leak reached Europe. Someone's posting pieces of the data, contracts, wire transfers, names. Sheng scanned the page. Half the files were genuine. The other half forged. They're twisting the truth, he said. If the wrong version wins, we stay ghosts forever. So what do we do? Qian asked. He looked at her. We find Lark. The crossing 2 nights, later they boarded a cargo vessel disguised as deckhands. The sea was black glass, stars sharp as nails overhead. Qian stood near the rail, hair whipping in the wind. Does this ever end? She asked. Everything ends, Sheng said. The trick is to choose how. Oh, at dawn a patrol boat appeared on the horizon. The captain swore under his breath. They shouldn't be here, he muttered. Sheng's eyes followed the vessel's wake. They're scanning manifests. If they board us. Han cut him off. We hide below. Cargo Bay 3. They ducked among crates of machinery as footsteps clanged overhead. Voices shouted in another language. Qian gripped Sheng's sleeve, hardly breathing. Then came a single gunshot. Not aimed at them, just a warning in the air. Moments later, the engines roared again. The patrol boat peeled away. Inspection scare, Han whispered. We're clear. Sheng exhaled. Next time, they'll come closer. Lark. They reached a humid port city 3 days later. Sheng left Han with the cargo crew and took Qian through the maze of old streets to a print shop marked only by faded letters. Crass inside. A woman with gray, streaked hair looked up from a typewriter. Didn't expect your ghost to knock, she said. Good to see you too, Sheng replied. You still have friends at the bureau? Some. Most are pretending not to. Her eyes shifted to Kian. And she is. The reason I'm still breathing. Lark poured 3 cups of bitter coffee. You want the world to know your uncle burned half the docks and pinned it on you. Fine. But truth needs proof in a stage. Sheng placed the flash drive on the desk. Everything you need. She whistled low. If I publish this, they'll come for all of us. They already are, Kian said quietly. Lark studied her, then nodded. All right. I'll start moving it through the underground networks. But you'll have to disappear again before sunrise. The betrayal. That night, they slept in an abandoned apartment above the shop. Rain pounded the windows, rhythmic, relentless. Around midnight, Han's phone vibrated. He stepped into the hallway to answer, returned a moment later, face pale. Trouble? Sheng asked. Han hesitated. The captain who sold us the cargo papers. He was caught. He gave up our route. Kian's breath caught. Then they know we're here. Yes. Sheng grabbed his jacket. Lark, get the files moving now. We'll draw them off. The older woman nodded, already typing commands into an encrypted console. You've got 30 minutes. The chase sirens began before the clock hit 20. By the time Sheng and Kian reached the street, black vans were turning corners, engines low and steady. He pulled her into a side alley, rain slashing down. This way, he whispered. They darted through back streets, over fences. Through markets closing for the night. Flashlights swept the alleys behind them. Every shout, every echo felt too close. Hein's voice came through a small radio. North Pier's clear. Boat waiting. They ran until the air tore in their lungs. The pier stretched out like a blade into the dark sea. Halfway down, Han stood beside a small motorboat, engine idling. Go, he shouted. Sheng helped Kian aboard, then leapt in after. The engine screamed as they sped into open water. Searchlights flared behind them, slicing through rain. But the sea swallowed sound and light alike. The broadcast miles from shore. Han switched on a portable receiver. Lark's voice came through, thin but triumphant. It's out. Every file. Every name. The networks picked it up before they could stop me. Sheng's hands clenched around the wheel. For the first time in months, relief felt real. Then it's over, he said. Not yet, Lark replied. They'll try to spin it. But the world's watching now. Stay alive long enough to be heard. The transmission ended. The radio hissed into silence. A moment of stillness, the storm eased. The sea turned silver under the rising moon. Kian leaned against the railing, soaked and exhausted. What happens when they find out we're still alive? Then we give them a story they can't erase, Sheng said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a single passport. The last clean identity he owned. He handed it to her. Your name's real on this one. Keep it that way. And you. I'll be the ghost they keep chasing. She shook her head. No. Not anymore. For a long moment neither spoke. The horizon ahead was wide open, the past burning somewhere far behind them. The sun came up red over the open sea. From the deck of the small boat, Sheng Li watched it climb through clouds that looked like smoke. For a few hours he let himself believe the world had turned quiet again. Then Han's radio hissed. Every network's playing it. The voice of Lark crackled. Governments confirming the files. Arrests in 6 cities. Shipping magnates, ministers, investors. But someone's feeding a counter story. They're calling the leaks fabricated by a rogue executive on the run. Sheng exhaled through his teeth. They're rewriting it already. They have the reach to bury truth, Han said. Then we'll burn brighter. A new front. By nightfall they reached a coastal city alive with noise. Sirens, protest chants, reporters crowding government gates. Posters showed Sheng's face beneath the word Tir Itoar. Others called him Muchest El Bilowar. The world hadn't chosen a side yet. In a safe apartment above a market, Lark set up a temporary command center. Laptops, shortwave radios, battery packs. Screens glowed blue in the dark like cold fire. "You've got 12 hours before they trace this location," she said. "If you want to speak, now's the time." "Live?" Sheng asked. "Live everywhere," she answered. "Every free station that will take it." Kian touched his arm. "You'll paint a target on yourself." "It's already there," he said. "I'd rather die telling the truth than live hiding from it." The broadcast at exactly midnight, Lark flipped the switch. A red light blinked on. "This is Sheng Li." His voice began, steady and deliberate. "For years my company was used as a shell for a network of corruption. When I uncovered it, they tried to burn me, literally and legally. The evidence you've seen is real. The men who built those fires will answer for them." He paused. "To those who still work in those towers, remember who you were before money became your god. To those listening who believe truth can be erased, watch me stand here and fail to disappear." Somewhere out in the city, the power grid flickered. Satellites caught the signal and scattered it across the globe. For a heartbeat, the world listened. Then the window exploded inward. "The raid dome," Han shouted. Glass rained across the floor. Outside, engines roared and boots struck pavement. Lark yanked the drives from her consoles, shoving them into a waterproof bag. "Back exit?" Sheng barked. He dragged Kian through the smoke toward a narrow stairwell. Bullets chewed plaster above them, loud, impersonal. They burst into the alley behind the building where rain hissed on metal roofs. A van screeched up. Han flung open the side door. "Go." They dove in, the van fishtailing as it sped away. Sirens swelled behind them. Sheng looked back once, saw shadows moving through the shattered apartment, screens still glowing, the red light of the broadcast blinking defiantly. "Did the feed cut?" he asked. Lark's voice came over Han's radio. "No. The whole world saw it. They can't unsee it." The pursuit, the chase carved through the sleeping city, across bridges, through tunnels, past streets where crowds were already gathering with placards and phone cameras. Every intersection became a blur of light and noise. Police convoys closed from 3 directions. Han turned hard onto an elevated ramp. "Hold on." Kian grabbed Sheng's arm as the van slammed through a construction barrier and into unfinished bypass. Sparks flared under the tires. They hit open highway, engines screaming. Ahead, a barricade glimmered under floodlights, armored vehicles blocking both lanes. Han cursed. Sheng leaned forward. "Off, ramp to the docks." Now. The van veered, skidding down a side road toward the waterfront. Behind them, sirens fractured into chaos. Someone had fired a warning shot skyward, but the echo sounded like thunder. The choice at the end of the pier, another ship waited. Its deck lights dimmed, engines rumbling. Lark had arranged it hours before, a final contingency. "This is your way out," Han said. "If you leave now, the broadcast survives. If you stay, they'll silence it with you." Sheng looked at Kian. She shook her head. "If you vanish again, they'll say you were guilty." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I stay long enough to prove I'm not." A searchlight swept across the harbor, loudspeakers barked orders in 2 languages. Han grabbed Sheng's shoulder. "You can't fight a government, sir." "No," Sheng said, eyes on the horizon, "but I can make them fight the truth." He pressed the data bag into Kian's hands. "If I don't make it, take this to the press in Hong Kong. Lark will know how to reach you." She caught his wrist. "Don't you dare turn this into goodbye." "It's not," he said. "It's a beginning." The stand floodlights converged. Sheng stepped forward onto the pier, hands raised, voice amplified by the loudspeakers that had once condemned him. "My name is Sheng Li," he shouted into the glare. "You've accused me of crimes to hide your own. The world saw what you tried to burn. You can arrest me, but you can't erase what's already out there." The crowd beyond the barricade erupted. Not just agents but civilians, reporters, workers shouting his name. Cameras flashed. The noise became a single, rising roar. Then, through it all, the first sunlight of morning cut through the rain. The pier glowed gold. Han whispered. They're hesitating. Good, Sheng murmured. Let them remember what daylight feels like. Return of the light. By midday the standoff ended. The government issued a statement confirming arrests, pending further inquiry. No one said who gave the order to hold fire, only that the broadcast had sparked a review of internal conduct. In a hospital ward overlooking the harbor, Qian sat beside Sheng's bed. His shoulder was bound, his expression calm. You told the truth, she said softly. For once, the world listened. Outside, reporters clamored for interviews, security agents waited for paperwork. The city hummed with something it hadn't felt in years. Hope mixed with fear, but alive. Qian turned toward the window where the sun blazed on the water. It's strange, she said. After everything, it looks beautiful again. It always was, Sheng replied. We just forgot how to see it. Rain returned to the city the night before the hearings. It slid down the courthouse windows in silver threads, washing the streets clean, but leaving the air heavy with anticipation. Reporters camped under umbrellas, cameras glistening like a row of black eyes waiting to blink. Somewhere in that crowd, someone murmured, "He's coming." Inside the armored van, Shengli straightened his cuffs. His arm was still weak, but the bandages had been replaced with clean linen. Qian sat across from him, her badge-marked witness 1014, fingers folded tightly in her lap. Are you sure about this? She asked. No, he said. But truth doesn't wait for comfort. The van stopped. Doors opened to a roar of voices. Flashbulbs popped. For the first time in months, he walked into daylight without running from it. The hearing, the courtroom, was a marble cavern filled with microphones and murmurs. The government committee sat high above the chamber. Across from them, the defense table waited with 3 attorneys who still believed in him. Or at least in their fees. Cameras broadcast everything lived to a world that had already decided its verdict and was now tuning in to see if it had been right. Prosecutor Wang adjusted her glasses. Mr. Li, she began, you stand accused of orchestrating financial manipulation and concealing crimes committed under your company's name. Do you maintain your innocence? Sheng looked up, voice clear. I maintain that truth was twisted to serve the powerful. I was one of them, until I refused to keep lying. A gasps rippled through the room. Wang leaned forward. Then you admit negligence. I admit blindness, he replied. But when I saw what was burning, I chose to step into the fire instead of walking away. The evidence hours passed as digital forensics experts confirmed the authenticity of the leaked files. Names appeared on the projector, ministers, board members, contractors. Each document stamped another layer of proof that Sheng's uncle and his allies had engineered the fires and laundered the profits through offshore fronts. Every fact matched the data Lark had released. Finally Wang turned to the witness stand. Miss Qian Chen, she called. Qian stood, heart pounding. Please state your relationship to the defendant. I was his employee's teacher, she said softly. And I was there the night he nearly died. She told the story plainly. No embellishment, just the rain, the chase, the kiss that saved a life. The courtroom fell silent. Even the prosecutor hesitated before asking, Did you believe him guilty when you fled together? I believed he was in danger, she answered. And I was right. When she finished, Sheng's gaze met hers across the room. For once, neither looked away. Verdict pending. By dusk the committee withdrew for deliberation. Outside, protesters filled the square, some chanting his name, others demanding his arrest. Helicopters circled. The city was split between justice and vengeance. In a quiet hallway, Qian found Sheng standing by a window overlooking the crowd. You could still disappear, she said. No one would blame you. I would, he replied. Running made me a ghost. This is how I come back to life. She smiled faintly. Then whatever happens, I'm staying until the end. The uncle's fall. The news broke first online. Former tycoon Li Guang confesses to arson and conspiracy and plea deal. Inside the courtroom, murmurs spread like wildfire. Prosecutor Wang entered, papers in hand. The principal conspirator has admitted to orchestrating your client exposed, she said. In light of new testimony, the commission moves to dismiss all criminal charges against Mr. Sheng Li. The gavel struck. Cameras flashed. For a moment, no one moved. Then the crowd outside erupted. Not just in cheers but in something deeper, a collective exhale after of holding breath. Shen closed his eyes. It's over, he whispered. Qian reached for his hand. It's beginning. Aftermath weeks passed before the noise faded. The press moved on to newer scandals, the market steadied. Sheng sold what remained of the Sheng Group's holdings to a cooperative of former employees and disappeared from the business pages. One morning, he stood on a small hill outside the city, where the conservatory's rebuilt annex now stood. Through the open window came the sound of piano. Soft, patient, like dawn learning how to breathe again. Qian sat at the keys, surrounded by students. He waited until the song ended before knocking. She looked up, surprise lighting her face. You kept your promise, she said. I try to keep at least one. They walked together through the garden, the world quiet for the first time in years. What will you do now? She asked. Teach, he said. Not music? Something smaller. How to tell the truth without losing yourself. And you? Play? She said. Because even ghosts need lullabies. The letter, that night she found a letter on her piano bench. Sheng's handwriting, simple and unhurried. When the world turned its back. You reminded me what light was. If someday history forgets our names, let it remember that we tried. The rest is music. She folded it carefully. Placed it between the pages of her sheet music, and began to play. Outside, the city lights flickered across the river. Not warning fires this time, but reflections of 1,000 windows shining. Epilogue months later. A headline appeared quietly on a foreign news site. Whistleblower Li Sheng invited to testify at Global Transparency Summit. Somewhere in a modest classroom overlooking the harbor, Sheng smiled at the news. Qian was already at the piano, practicing the piece that had carried them through the dark. He joined her at the bench. Together they played as the sun climbed above the sea, flooding the room with the same light that had once saved them. And for the first time, the light stayed. The seasons changed quietly. Rain turned to wind, wind to sunlight, and the city healed itself the way old wounds do. Slowly, without ceremony. The world no longer whispered the name Shen Li in fear or fascination. It had become something steadier, quieter, a symbol of how truth could survive even when the people who carried it nearly did not. He lived simply now, near the sea. His home was a small wooden house on the hill, above the harbor, with wide windows that caught the morning light. Every day began the same way: tea, silence, and a piano's first note drifting down toward the shore. Qian lived a few streets away, in a white house trimmed with ivy. She taught at the conservatory 3 days a week, played benefit concerts once a month, and sometimes walked the old coastal road to find him sitting on the porch with a book in his lap. They didn't talk much about the past anymore. The world had already done enough talking. When they did speak, it was about the color of the sky, the rhythm of the tide, or a new melody she was composing. Those were the things that lasted. One evening, as the sun went down, she joined him on the porch. The horizon burned gold, and the sea shimmered like glass. Neither said a word for a while. Finally, Qian turned to him. You ever wonder what it was all for? Sheng smiled faintly. Every day. But then I hear the city playing again. Laughter, traffic, music. And I think maybe that's enough. As she leaned her head against his shoulder. You found peace, Mr. Li. Not found, he said. Earned. They sat there until the stars appeared, one by one, lighting the dark. The sound of a piano drifted faintly from the conservatory below. One of her students practicing late, chasing perfection. Sheng listened with his eyes closed. Sounds like hope, he murmured. Qian smiled. It is. He reached over, laced his fingers through hers, and for the first time since the night of the fire, there was no fear in his hands. Only warmth, only calm. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of rain and salt and jasmine from her garden. Somewhere far off, the waves rolled against the rocks, steady and eternal. Qian whispered. The world finally caught its breath. Sheng looked toward the horizon, where the last edge of sunlight touched the sea. Then let it keep breathing. The piano below struck its last chord soft, clean, perfect. And the light stayed.